right. So our mission statement is to build and be a local hub for diverse peer-led recovery communities, really with an emphasis on diverse. Even though the peer recovery movement was created as this radical movement that wanted to center those most directly impacted, a lot of peer-led organizations or peer specialists, in a similar way to traditional mental health services, are reflecting similarly mostly cisgender, mostly white, mostly able-bodied individuals. So we really focus on having a diverse group of peer supporters. It's not enough that you've been through something in your life. I want someone who looks like me and talks like me, and like I don't have to explain what my language means or, you know, whatever it might be. I don't have to code switch. So some of the communities that we support, we currently have 22 different unique communities that we support. A few of them is anyone navigating any life struggle. We thought it was really important to have kind of broad spaces for people that didn't fit our identity focused spaces. And really, again, making sure that it wasn't just mental illness or substance abuse struggles, but grief, trauma, whatever it might be. We also are working on a space right now called Not an Outside Issue for people in substance abuse recovery to talk about their mental health, to talk about racism, to talk about things that might be leading to some of their need to use negative coping skills, where in a lot of spaces that's considered an outside issue. We have to stop separating substance abuse from mental health and start looking at whole people. Some of our other groups is autistic adults. People often treat autism like it's something you age out of. There's not a lot of resources for when you're over 18. Queer women, the Black community, Black LGBTQ plus community, Hispanic community, healing professionals to take off their work caps and admit that this work is hard. If any of you want to come to that, you're more than welcome. Gender queer community is a disabled community, people living with HIV, and those that heal through gardening, writing, Dungeons and Dragons, and more. And we currently, even though we have 22 communities, we currently have a wait list of 32 communities. So whenever people have ideas, we certainly write those down. I would love to hear if you all have any ideas for a community that really lacks a support system. We really focus on if the community already exists, referring people that way. But, you know, we write down everything that people recommend, and our hope is to expand and be able to have even more communities. Some of the communities that we're working on right now is aged out foster kids, those have experienced sexual abuse, crime survivors, returning citizens, and more. So we currently have 4 different resources. Our most common resource is our community gatherings. We have daily peer support available virtual. We have both virtual and in-person things, but we currently have for the general community a virtual peer group. All of our stuff is free at 12 p.m. and at 6 p.m. Monday to Saturday for those people that really need an ongoing support system. And we really have people that attend twice a day, every day. And then we have people that pop in every 6 months and tell us how, you know, how they're doing, how life is. We basically just take turns sharing whatever's going on in our life. And at the end, you get to say if you just wanted to vent, if you're open to words of support, if you're open to advice from a place of I. So we have daily identity focused and activity focused. So our identity focused community gatherings are for some of the communities that I mentioned before. And we're expanding on our activity focused community gatherings. So we talked about the individualism of peer services. So, you know, we're often told, find what works for you. But that's like a really loaded question. I don't know what works for me, and it can be expensive to try out different hobbies. So the idea is we're connecting people that have similar wellness tools, or giving spaces for people to explore new wellness tools. So that's different things like that, Dungeons and Dragons, gardening, expressive art. We have improv, we have painting, we have acting, all sorts of really cool, fun stuff. We also began providing one-to-one peer support in September. So that looks like being able to, there's 2 ways you can get connected. One of them is you can fill out a getting to know you form. we share that with our group of peer supporters. We have 50 of them, and they, look through to see who feels like they'd be a good fit for that person. Or people can go through the profiles of our peer supporters themselves and try to find someone. Everyone shares their lived experience, their boundaries, how often they can meet, what kind of formats they can meet in. And they can find someone and reach out for them themselves. I've really loved how our one-to-one peer support has grown. We provide one-to-one peer support in more traditional ways, such as just holding space, creating a wellness plan together, creating a daily maintenance plan. But we also have people that, for example, are in eating disorder recovery, and they'll have a Zoom session. And like, when I take a bite, you take a bite, but we don't talk about it. We just talk about anime, and that helps people nourish themselves and eat. We have people that are playing games and want distraction, all sorts of stuff. We also have lived experience-led advocacy. I think there's a big push to center communities, especially in the last 2 years. So a lot of people want to be better allies to communities, but they don't know what to do, and they're asking people, but they're putting that emotional labor on them. So we do the work for them through a peer-led process. We invite at least 30 people from a community and say, what do you wish people knew about your community? And we work together to create a workshop that is something like what the LGBTQ plus community wish you knew, what those living with HIV wish you knew, what those living with eating disorders wish you knew. So we work together, basically all those 22 communities. If they want to have an advocacy component, they can. It doesn't always look like a workshop. Sometimes it's a panel, sometimes it's an open mic event, sometimes it's social media graphics. We really try to encourage people to be creative, because I don't know the best way for a community that isn't my own to reach that community. So we really trust our communities to do it in a communally driven process, but we're challenging oppressive, discriminatory systems and advocating for those with mental health struggles. Lastly, we are currently working to open up a peer-led respite center. It should be open by the end of this year, which I'm really happy to share. Y'all are actually some of the first people to know about that. But a peer-led respite center is a home-like non-clinical environment where people can stay for free overnight for a few nights. And the idea is they're the driver of their own recovery. We have activities going on, but we've all been somewhere where we need to stare at a wall for 3 days. So if they want to stare at a wall for 3 days, that's cool too. But the idea is, I know when I'm breaking down before I've reached a point of crisis, but there's not necessarily somewhere for me to go. So this would be the first mental health overnight peer-led respite in Central Florida. And it would be the first queer-led peer-led respite center in the nation. So we're really very, very excited for this program to start. And like all of our services, it's going to be free. So some successes that we've had over the last 3 years. I don't think that the human experience can be quantified. With that said, as I look at numbers, it's hard to argue that we haven't had a really big reach in the last 3 years. I think a lot of it is because this is needed, period. A lot of it is during the pandemic, that need for human connection was greater than ever. But in the past 3 years, we are a community of over 50 peer supporters. We have created 22 unique peer-led community spaces. We've held over 2,000 community gatherings. We've held 905 one-to-one sessions, and that's just since September. Our services have been used over 10,000 times last year alone. Since our services went virtual, we're in about 18 states and 22 countries. So people are welcome, as long as they're 18 years old, to use our services regardless of where they live geographically. And we've been featured in the news over 35 times. So it takes a community to heal a community. And these are some ways that you can get involved with peer support space. So of course you can donate. There's a reality. If we're not charging people, it costs us something. You can join a committee. All of our committees are open to the community, whether it's program development or fundraising, advocacy committee, whatever it might be. finding meaningful ways to partner with one another, and also spreading the word. We don't want to be this hidden gem. We want people to know about us. I used to work as a discharge planner at a residential treatment center. And if people were primary mental health or co-occurring, I had almost no resources for them if they didn't have the ability to pay. So we want people to know that these services are available, they're free, and we love new friends. So in order to spread the word about us, I did want to share our Facebook, our Instagram. Candidly, our Twitter is not that active, but definitely follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We do a lot of our lived experience-led advocacy. It's a great way to learn about communities from communities. And then to find more information or share our resources, the best place to go is peersupportspace.org. So there's a big download our resources button on the home page when you type in peersupportspace.org. That's the first thing I'm updating. When you have so many groups, things are constantly changing. So sometimes I'm hesitant to print out group flyers and just tell people, go to our website, find the most recent flyer, give that to the person you're supporting. And back to my initial thought of we can all help in different ways. I genuinely, peer support space is one of many things going on. A lot of those are highlighted during this conference, but every single one of those pieces is extremely important. I wanted to offer some ways to hold space without fixing. We've had over the last 3 years, our peer supporters collectively have created kind of a holding space guide for how they provide peer support in a very peer-led process. And these are some example verbiage, which is at least really helpful for me in learning on what you can say when people are reaching out to you for support. There is a human nature to want to fix people. There's also a human nature to want to connect. But what happens is sometimes people are just really reaching out because they want to be heard, because they want space to be held for them, and they're not trying to be fixed. Or sometimes when we offer a personal example of why we understand, it can be invalidating because we don't ever actually fully know what it is to be in someone else's shoes. So I'd say the biggest one on here is how can I support you versus assuming that they're looking for solutions or advice or seeing how you can relate to them. Sometimes people are like, I just want to vent. Sometimes they're like, send me some memes, send me some pictures of your dog, whatever it might be. Send me some TV recommendations. Can you come over? I am hungry. Can you send me some food? Sometimes there's really tangible ways. And I will say too, not just saying, how can I support you, but offering, for example, here's some ways that I'm willing to support you can be really helpful, because when I'm struggling, I don't know what I need. But when someone's like, have you eaten? And I'm like, oh no, I'm very hungry, and they're like, great, I'm sending you some Uber Eats. That's a tangible way. So giving also examples of ways you're willing to provide support. I also really like to work out with not just those I provide peer support to, but with my friends. We openly talk about our boundaries and our capacity. So, I tell people, reach out to me and I promise I will let you know if I'm not available. And I tell them, thank you for saying that you're there for me. But let me know when you're not. And when people say no, it makes me feel more comfortable asking them again, because I know there's someone who's going to be honest to me about where their emotional capacity is. So it's something that I have an open dialogue with people in my personal life, not just people I support personally. But some other responses can be, I care about you. Sometimes if it's a stranger, I don't know you, but I genuinely care about you. Thank you for trusting me with this is huge, because we live in a world that tells us not to talk about our mental health. That sounds really hard. Were you looking for advice? And when we give advice, giving it from a place of this is what I would do, right? Because we don't fully know what it is to be in someone else's shoes. If there are ways I can have your back, I want to. I'm grateful for this time with you. Your feelings are valid. is it okay if I check in with you at blank time tomorrow? So if somebody's having a hard time, asking if checking in is helpful and when I can check in. I'm listening. I hear you. So I totally made too many slides. So I flew through that. But I did want to make sure that we had some space for questions and for dialogue. I am an open book. I'm happy to answer any personal questions, resource questions, questions about peer services. Um, so yeah, I'd love to have a chat with whoever wants to.
I'll jump in. So thank you so much for sharing your story, for putting on this presentation. I had thought about reaching out before, like I was working at a local university and we were doing some diversity work, and we had some of these needs, and we were thinking about how we could do some peer support. And then I work with my buddy Adam, who's sitting in the room too, and we were talking recently at a board retreat about some of these types of things for people who are dealing with poverty and things like that too. So what would be the best way to do some of those things, to work with additional organizations, or how could groups of people get involved?
Yeah, that is definitely a really good question. I can kind of shed some light on how we kind of create groups and like what that process looks like. And you know your community best, so it might look different for you. But when we're creating a group, normally step one is just bringing together people from that community. What's hard with poverty is if I am going through a hard time, holding space for others might not be the top thing on my priority. So especially when it comes to communities that come from lower income, or are experiencing homelessness or whatever it might be, I highly recommend you pay them, because otherwise, like they're going to spend their time doing something they can get paid for because they need a roof over their head. They need to be fed. But we do it by bringing together people that are from that community. And we kind of start by saying, what are your ideas? We go through why do we want to do this? How do we want to do this? Is it socials? Is it activities? Is it topics? Is it a mixture of all of these things, right? And then from there, we normally have them attend a few peer support spaces, which you're welcome to send them to ours. We just ask that people, don't be an observer, but be a participant. Doesn't mean you need to actually share, you're welcome to just listen and hold space for people. But then we kind of come back and create what we call a flexible blueprint. So this is my group description. We make a comfort agreement depending on the community that can look like different things. So we were once working on a veteran group, for example, and they're like, we don't have a comfort agreement. We have a SOP. This is our standard operating procedure. And like, we only have socials. We never sit in circles, right? So depending on the community, it can look really different, but they kind of create some group norms, and it can look different. We once had a space for, people working towards body positivity or body neutrality. So part of the comfort agreement was that, all body sizes, colors, shapes are welcome here. So depending on the community, creating whatever you think the issues might be in the space, it creates a way of, hey, we all agreed on this. So I, as a facilitator, if part of my comfort agreement is, we all get an equal chance to share, then when Adam starts like talking so much, instead of being the decider, like you're talking too much, I can say, oh, our comfort agreement wanted to give everyone an equal chance to share. Adam, do you mind holding back a little? I want to see if anybody else has something to say, and then you can chime in, right? So that comfort agreement really kind of creates ways for you to navigate the group. But that flexible blueprint, you don't have the group until you have your first group to make a truly peer-led communal process. So I'm taking that flexible blueprint that I made with this group of facilitators or people interested, and people that don't want to facilitate but are just interested in being a space are welcome to that as well. But it's at the first group that I'm then, explaining why this was important to me and my co-facilitator. and this is what we came up with, but like, what do you all think, and really making sure that every single group, I'm going over that comfort agreement and I'm asking, do we have any unique needs for today? And if someone brings something up that seems like a really good idea, I'll be like, do we want to permanently add that to that comfort agreement? So just making sure that it's really created in a, communal process. And sometimes we also like to do a survey before making that flexible blueprint to just figure out where people are, what they want. If I was creating a peer-led group for those experiencing poverty, I'd probably have food there, right? So like, what does your community want? What's going to get them there? So I don't know if that's really helpful, but that's, some of the things we do to create a new group.
It was good. Thank you.
Yeah. And then ongoingly to continue supporting, we have a director of peer services. So people have unlimited one-to-one, we call it peer support for our peer supporters, whether it's personal or professional. They can ask for a group meeting to kind of be a sounding board or receive support. Monthly, we have a facilitator check-in with all of our peer supporters where we come in and we share opportunities for growth, things we're struggling with. What do we do if someone's suicidal? How do we better set boundaries? How, whatever it might be. And we learn together. And then monthly, we also have a co-learning session where we bring in somebody to do some sort of professional development with us. Is anyone else?
There?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. It was quiet. So I was going to ask one more question. Was there a specific place that you said, because I remember you talked about it, but I missed it, a specific place where you got the certification to be a peer support specialist?
Yeah. So that
or somewhere that you recommend.
I can put the link in the chat. Peer Support Coalition of Florida is a good resource for it. But there's 4 different designations: adult, youth, family, and veteran. But you basically have to do about 40 hours of training, and then you have to do 500 hours of experience. And a lot of times we have people that are working towards their certification that are volunteering with us, whatever that might look like. But I'll drop that link in the chat.
Thank you.
And there are scholarships available for people that can't afford the training. Thank you. Any other questions?
Can you repeat the name of the organization again?
Yeah, it is. I'm going to put it in the chat. It's the Peer Support Coalition of Florida.
Yasmin, this is Pam. I apologize. I entered late. Is this a service you're providing for free? And I'm sorry that I didn't catch that.
Yeah, no, that's A-okay. I will also put the link in the chat for that. All of these services are free. People just have to be 18 years old.
How do you fund it? That's the follow-up.
Yeah, that's a good question.
How is it funded?
Yeah, whatever it takes. No, most of our funding comes from grants. We write grants. We also do fundraisers. We also do corporate sponsorship. Sometimes I'll do consulting as a form of earned income. A lot of our donations are also just individual donors. So we really try to diversify our funding sources, but if we're not charging people, like the money has to come from somewhere. So yeah, it's really a mixture of grants, foundations, county funding, and different fundraisers.
I've definitely done a lot of grant work in the past, so I'll definitely reach out to you in the future, see if I can help at all.
Yeah, it sounds good. And let me actually put my email in the chat too, if any of you want to connect. Grants are not easy, so kudos to you, Pamela. What other questions do we have? Was there anything that, like a favorite takeaway from the presentation that any of you had, or something you didn't know?
Well, I didn't know about the organizations that you just mentioned, and I just want to say you are a great presenter, so thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yes, Yasmin, this is Katie Nessel with Orange County Public Schools. Your energy is contagious, and I don't know you, but I'm rooting for you, girl. And I do have a question though. My schedule is pretty busy as a full-time employee with OCPS and full-time mom, etc. But like, have you ever seen this type of work done within institutions itself? Like, for example, a big institution like OCPS?
Yeah, so that is a really good question. Peer services are really effective for youth. Like, we were all a kid at some point. You don't listen to your parents or your teachers or your therapist, like you listen to your friends, right? I am not aware of what specifically Orange County Public Schools is doing, but I've heard of really successful peer services in other areas. For example, there was a program, I can't think of the name, I'm sorry, but it was a county that had the highest suicide rate in the country. And they created a peer-led program where they basically interviewed everybody in school and said, who are the top 3 friends you talk to and you're going through a hard time? And the school saw that a lot of the same students were constantly mentioned. So those students had the option to take an elective to learn how to be a hope advocate or whatever they called it, but they were being a peer. And they started creating things like benches around the school. There was a certain table in the cafeteria where it was just understood if somebody sits there, that means they want somebody to talk to. And their suicide rates went down dramatically. So peer services are definitely really effective, especially for youth. I'm hoping in the future we can do a little bit more youth peer services. It's a capacity thing for now. But I do sometimes go and do speaking engagements to youth. I love kids, and I've done that for a few Orange County Public Schools. We do a really fun presentation called If We Treated Mental Health Like a Broken Arm. And I just have people share, things that they were told that was not helpful whatsoever when they were going through a hard time. And they'll say things like, think positively, like, did you pray about it? Like, you're overreacting. And, I write those all down. And then I have an extroverted student pretend to break their leg in front of the class. And everybody starts yelling those things at them. And we just kind of talk about how, we would never say that to someone going through a physically hard time, but we actually say those things to people going through a mentally hard time. So am totally available for youth workshops, even though we don't have youth services right now. But yes, the peer model is absolutely something that can be adopted for youth and in public school systems. It's common in other areas. Florida just likes to be behind when it comes to mental health.
Yeah, thank you so much, Yasmin.
You're very welcome.
I was just going to say that I know that for years in the advocacy work I've done, a lot of times we'll recommend teens to contact like Alateen, the 12-step programs though that are for children in dysfunctional homes and that. So I don't know if those are, if there's any crossover with anything like that with volunteers that you have or programs, but yeah, that's about the only thing I've ever heard about there. So
I'm not familiar with that one in particular, but, like I said before, peer services can take many forms. And I'm sure there's lots of crossover as to, our core values of peer support and how they're doing it. I didn't ask ahead of time, but Caroline is one of our peer supporters, was actually the first peer supporter we hired past me and my co-founder. And I wanted to see if you were open to me maybe putting you on the spot and sharing anything you want to about your experiences as a peer supporter with peer services.
Sure. I'm okay with you doing that. Hi, everyone. Like I said earlier, I appreciate you taking time out of your day to learn about peer support. I think it's really it's a powerful thing. It's beautiful to see, especially in the last couple of years with people going through so many various hardships, both related and unrelated to the pandemic, losing loved ones, losing jobs, losing homes, and seeing folks through some really, really tough times and seeing them on the other side of that, but also finding community to lean on while they are going through that hard time and not rushing them to get to the other side of that. So I'll just say, like, it's an honor to behold that power. And I think it's such a necessary complement to the system for folks both within the traditional model and who are seeking something outside of it. So again, thank you all for being open to learning about it. And this is how we keep the movement going.
Thank you, Caroline. Sorry to put you on the spot.
I just wanted to pipe in and also say thank you and also compliment you on your fabulous presentation skills. I'm thrilled to know about this organization. Going into clinical mental health counseling, I do see myself providing your services to clients who are looking for validation and a safe place to be themselves and to get support from those like them. So I do appreciate all of your information. I've saved the bookmark, and I was wondering if there's a portion or a slide that you could share. Maybe I can just email you. I'd love to have a resource on hand, like a flyer or something, if that is available.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. Our flyer is more pages than it needs to be, but we have a lot of groups. So peersupportspace.org, there's a big download our resources button on the homepage. And
Awesome.
That's going to take you to our flyer. And the first page is really kind of an overview. And then, we have that daily communal gatherings. Caroline's one of the facilitators for it each day. And then we have all of our general and activity-based peer support spaces. So these are for anyone 18 and up. It'll tell you if it's in person or if it's virtual. And then the rest is all of our identity-focused support spaces. So there's a whole ton of them.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you so much. And also I wanted to add, like, peer services or our resources, like, they're not just for people that are like struggling or going through a hard time. Like, I feel like something that isn't often uplifted is it's hard to make friends as an adult, so a lot of times it really is for social support and just to make some friends. There's so many people that moved during the pandemic, and a lot of people, they're really socializing with their close friends and not acquaintances or new people to the degree that they used to. It's hard to move to a new area, period. Or sometimes you get out of a relationship and you realize, oh gosh, my partner was my only friend. So a lot of times it really is just to make friends. And that's valid because having friends is so important for our mental health. Any other? Yeah, go ahead.
Do you have different age groups that you deal with?
We are just 18 and up. So it's not age specific. We do have people from all walks of life. We did once have an age specific group. It was women aging together. But they were really overwhelmed by Zoom during the pandemic. So it was put on pause. But we have people from all ages, which it's actually been really cool. So, like, to give some examples, I facilitate Butterfly Talks, which is our group for LGBTQ plus people of marginalized genders. You normally go to an LGBTQ event and it's mostly cisgender gay men, which I love my cisgender gay men, don't get me wrong, but, we wanted a space where we felt represented. But there's huge differences in language, in, the way the world was for LGBTQ plus people, generations before mine. And today there's unique challenges too for young people, like social media. And we've really been able to learn from one another in a way that I think is really beautiful. I really enjoy that we have such vast ages in our spaces because it brings a different perspective, and, how we see the world is different, but I definitely think we can learn from each other.
Thank you.